Okay, right. Well, thank you very much for coming back. Welcome back. On the panel, we have joining our speakers Paul Bavistock of Fortitude Partners, who, as I mentioned earlier, is the architect of our own pilot industry awareness campaign. So we have got some questions here. If we don't get through them all in the allotted time, then I will perhaps pass them on to our speakers and get them to respond in writing. We can post those up on the website afterwards. Okay, I'm just going to take these in no particular order. There's one or two that are slightly similar, so I'll probably just do those together. Here's one. Many oil and gas people think that we, i.e. the industry, shouldn't bother with the media, that we should just keep the cars running and not make a mess. Well, what do you think about that? Kerry?
Well, I can see the logic. I can see the logic that it's very easy to say, look, there's nothing wrong at the moment. Let's have a disaster emergency plan in place, and we won't engage necessarily unless we need to. But I think, and I don't necessarily even think that this is just applicable to the media, but to any kind of stakeholder that you're engaging with, if you are going to them on a regular basis with things that they're interested in and that are relevant to them, at the point where there is a crisis, they know you, you know them. You're not just going in and trying to manage the whole mess that you've got with people who have got no engagement with your business whatsoever. So I would say, keep it relevant. All of the things that we've been talking about this morning, keep it relevant, keep it exciting, keep it interesting, but ignore, the fourth estate, for want of a better word, at your peril. I don't think you should. It's a bad idea.
Tina?
Just to add to that, I think likewise I would say you can't ignore the media. I mean, the media is a big collective, and I think you do have to look at it by breaking it down into some of its different parts. The technical media, many of whom I'm suspecting you will work with very closely, as opposed to perhaps some of the more sensationalist end of media, which maybe you work with a little less closely, or hopefully. So I think first you've got to understand the beast, and that is really important, that you understand how they work, what they want, and therefore decide consciously how you are going to operate with them. And there may be some that you do want to work with, and others that you do choose to leave outside, but you still understand how they work.
I think the other thing to bear in mind is, if you're an incredibly large corporate organisation, then clearly there are people within your organisation who will be dealing with this on a daily basis. If you're a medium or smaller enterprise, then the reason that you join a trade body is to make sure that you've got those bases covered, and you can put across all of your positive stories through your trade association. It keeps you a little bit more anonymous if you're worried about having to mix it with the big boys in the media, but it means that you're still engaged. I think that's important. Paul?
Yeah, I would just add that I think although they can oftentimes be an unpalatable fact of life, the national media specifically, they're utterly essential in that they set the context for the politicians particularly that govern your license to operate. You shouldn't think of the media as a way to reach people. Lots of people, including our engaged Britons, consume an awful lot of media, but they do so with the same amount of trust that they afford large industry, that is to say none. They read it to get a wide breadth of opinion and consume as much information as they can before they then create their own judgments. So the media, in my view, are a tool to reach politicians and set the context that politicians care about specifically. And I alight on politicians, not regulators, and politicians, not specialist economists.
Sometimes. Regulators too, they can be swayed.
That's right. So Gus isn't in the room anyway.
Right, here's one, well, actually two questions that are quite similar. The tectonic plates are shifting regarding perceptions of our industry. What is the one key area we should be concentrating over the next year? And a similar question was, having seen oil and gas proposed campaign, where do you think we should really need to focus? And Paul, do you want to kick off with that one?
Sure. Well, I mean, we started this work, I guess, now almost 18 months ago, when we were asked to conduct a piece of research. And I know we're all shocked, always, in our own line of work, that we think it's so central to our being. Amazingly enough, when you ask the general public what they think about the industry, the answer is not a lot. They don't spend a great deal of time engaging with it. There's a tremendously low level of awareness about it, the distinctions between upstream and downstream, the misconceptions and received wisdoms around where the oil and gas is coming from. But there's no great engagement, there is that word, there's no great engagement with the topic. What becomes quickly clear is if you do begin to have a discussion in which you marshal your arguments in a relatively short order of arguments, that's important, you can't spin out too long of a story, then perceptions will move. So you'd expect me in my game to say it's important to do it, especially given that, and this is the other point, politicians also care about, if there's one thing that politicians care about more than the media, it's their own paycheck, dependent upon the result of the next election, dependent upon how people vote, dependent upon voters' perceptions. That's why perception matters. In terms of focus, I would say that there is an economic future. You know, we're seeing the, dare I say it, the green shoots, we're told. I'm allowed to say that because I'm not elected.
I'm not sure if you are.
Yeah, the green shoots. But we're going to be in Western democracies, we're going to be in a low growth, no growth environment for some time to come. Resources, in their broadest sense, matter. Jobs matter. Economic contribution matters. And people know that and feel it and experience it in their daily economic circumstance. That's the area of focus, in my view.
Okay, I'm just watching time, and we do have a few questions, so I'll move on to the next one, actually, and I think this one is quite, it is quite pertinent, quite sharp. Do you think the oil and gas industry currently has a license to operate in the view of society? And the various points that this person who's asked the question sort of perhaps points to where they're coming from. For example, it's an unsustainable sector, it's high carbon, there's a morality of profits, bonuses, profiting from public poverty with petrol prices and fuel prices, that sort of thing. Pollution, unsafe practices, the list could go on. Do actually we have, in the eyes of the general public or engaged Britons, do we have a licence to operate?
Shall I offer a comment first?
And
Quite a profound question before we all split our wrists and go, oh my God. What for me, definitely the industry has a licence to operate. The industry is a necessity. I mean, some of the statistics were on that video. And we don't yet, as a nation or as a world, have the full alternatives that one would need for this industry to be not required anymore. And no one is better than the players here sat in the room, your colleagues around the country, in terms of actually delivering that responsibility to bring oil and gas into the markets in a safe, efficient way. So you definitely have that license to operate. You are a legal industry. You operate against the laws of the land and your own standards. So you have the license to operate. The big moral question of actually what are going to be the industries that are here in 100, 200 years' time, that's a separate discussion. We do live in today's world, and we make decisions for today's world, anticipating the future as best we can. The license is there. You are the best to hold it. But it's not a given. It has to continue to be earned.
do you want to add?
Yeah, actually, it sort of reminded me of something that we've been discussing quite recently, and you're talking about, looking into the future and how energy collection is going to change, I suppose. For us, the similar debate in the media industry is convergence. So, who gets to be in charge of what goes out through the pipes and ends up on people's screens? And there are a lot of new players in the market who rhymes with Moogle, who are saying everything is obsolete other than the internet. We're having to spend a lot of time saying, well, that's not necessarily the case, and that content will be the future. And those of us who make it are actually the ones who are going to be the future, because again that demand is expanding. And it's the same thing, so you're thinking into the future about what people are going to need, whether or not you need to potentially diversify into other areas, but you're still relevant, and relevance is the key.
Paul.
So I think that the industry definitely has a license to operate and will continue to have a license to operate, but that license will be granted with a great deal more rigor, and that's because we're living in a quite interesting world. There's some very profound things going on in our world at the moment. Question mark, are we seeing the breakdown of traditional Western democratic models, their ability to deliver sustained economic growth in a networked world where people are seeing more, experiencing more, talking to each other more, and thinking that they can come up with better solutions? Tina touched upon social investment. You can call it that, but social investment models. What are you going to be required to do as an industry, particularly in developing nations, and I'm thinking now about Africa specifically, to pay for your license to do business? Governments, international institutions, third-party arm's length national institutions set up by really forward-thinking governments in Africa are going to be looking at you for shared and collaborative solutions to help them create a shared value economy. Your license to operate is going to be profoundly different if you just bury your head in the sand and don't begin to talk to all of the relationships that you hold in the networked environment. You will be legislated out of business.
Could I just have one comment? I know I've already spoken once, but just, I think there's actually, for me, as I look at corporate organisations as a whole, the skills that we retain and invest in and develop, the innovation that we bring, that we also invest in, the research, development, etc., the supply chains we support, I actually think corporate organisations will earn a greater licence to operate going forward than perhaps in the past 50 years we've seen from governments and public sector. So I think corporate organisations have a massive licence to operate if you take us in the round. And it's how we work with that responsibility and indeed that scale, I think is a significant
One
matter.
bullet point. You're the ones with the answers. Government is not the one with the answers. And the tension here is how you're going to continue to operate as a commercial business, satisfy particularly your shareholders, but at the same time help government out to deliver the kinds of civic society that voters are demanding all over the world. Good luck.
Shall we go now?
Yeah. Sorry.
I've got two very, very quick questions, so you can't go, just very quickly. Now, this was actually for me. Do Engage Britons read the Daily Mail, the Guardian, the Financial Times, the Sun, or the Telegraph? I'm going to say yes, they do. But I'm going to pass over to Paul to say just a very quick little bit more about what these Engage Britons actually do, because actually they are defined by the media they consume.
So engaged Britons aren't necessarily defined by a traditional socio-economic demographic. There are various factors. A major one is their consumption of media, whether that be online, broadcast, or print. And the thread that runs through them is that they're incredibly Catholic in their consumption tastes, and broad. So they're absolutely thirsty for media. So the answer could be all of the above, a subset of the above, but mostly a very broad set of that media.
Okay. We've got time for one last question, and I really ask this with my heart in my hands here. Tina. No, it's not Tina. Sorry, it's for Kerry. It's for Kerry. Does the Oil and Gas UK video pass your so what test?
Well, I don't want to crush anybody's heart, so I would never dream of saying anything that...
Yes.
Yeah.
But yes.
I think it comes back to the point that I made earlier. It has to be done in context. So you could put that on a DVD and send it to every MP on the Energy Committee. And so what? Because, it's pretty. If I was George Monbiot, I'd be a bit worried about that lovely beach with the bloody great oil refinery on the end of it. Just saying. But if you're going to take that and use it to do something, then... yes, it's perfectly dandy as a piece of media. So you take that and you use it wisely in all of the other structured conversations that you're having in conjunction with your pilot conversation. But you don't just throw it out there. That's what ceases to be relevant when you're just bunging stuff out into the ether, where if you put oil industry video into Google, it might turn up on page 5.
Excellent. No, absolutely. And so on that note, we're going to take our dandy video and take it to the relevant audiences and the relevant places. So thank you. I'm going to bring everything to a close now. I'd like to thank our speakers, Kerry Kent and Tina Trickett, and of course our panellist, Paul Bavistock, and indeed I'd like to thank our sponsors, without whose support this event couldn't happen, Herbert Smith Freehills and the Royal Bank of Scotland. And thank you to the Royal Bank of Scotland again for hosting us so well today. A final reminder for those who haven't done so, there is a feedback form. Please do fill that in because it helps us to shape future events. We also have a leaflet for Energising the Nation's Future, and I do encourage you to go to the website and do it all online, but for those of you who may have a phobia about click and point, you can use this and you can pass that to us on your way out as well. A reminder too that this morning's presentations, along with a webcast, will be available online from this afternoon, and we will email you the link to those. And finally, all that remains for me to say is to thank you very much indeed for coming along this morning, and I look forward to seeing you at our next London Breakfast, which will be on the 18th of September. Have a good summer. Thank you.